So, welcome back to today's video, identifying negative thought patterns. Now, I know we've touched on this topic before, and I just want to spend a bit of time revisiting the concepts as they're an important foundation for our work together. We'll take a look at common negative patterns, and then using your journal, we'll look at adding to what you've already started in recognizing the difference between the associated positive and the redundant negative associated with your subconscious memories. Now, again, you may have mastered these concepts already, and if you have, then I congratulate you. You are firmly on your path and progressing towards your spiritual excellence and becoming the you that you were born to become. However, if you're still finding it all a little challenging, then rest assured that you're not alone. And as long as you've been following the course and practicing what you've learned, then you too are well and truly on your path. You just need a little more time. In my experience, it's usual for this process to take longer for some than others. It's not a competition or a sprint, as they say. It's your personal journey that you must tread at your own pace. So something I've learned and have been conscious of for much time is twofold. Firstly, that beating myself up for the things that I did that I perceived to be bad or wrong was utterly futile and inconducive to my spiritual growth. You see, as long as I'd recognized and learned from my mistake and taken corrective action where necessary, then there was no point dwelling on the negative associated with it. So I learned to remove the negative immediately, as discussed previously, which didn't remove the thought itself or the problem or the situation that I perceived myself to have created. But it left me with clarity on how to move forwards more harmoniously. And indeed, the great Bob Proctor once said it, that if you're not making mistakes, then you're not moving forwards. I can relate to this, and although I'm still making mistakes for sure, the propensity for me to do so has significantly reduced from when I started practicing the techniques that we're working with together. So secondly, and equally powerfully, I learned to celebrate my every win, no matter how small or trivial it may have seemed, with gratitude and joy. And I don't mean go out and paint the town red every time or throw a party, although I guess you could if you wanted to, depending upon your perceived magnitude of the win. What I mean is to begin to recognize when you've achieved something that you're proud of or that has simply progressed you another step on your path, and allowing yourself to feel great about yourself with joy and gratitude. So that's just one example of recognizing and overcoming a negative pattern. One piece of advice that I absorbed at some point, which was extremely useful for me in the early stages of my development, was that whenever I indulged a negative thought and came to a conclusion that made me feel bad, I'd consciously take a step back and observe my thoughts. I'd take 3 deep breaths, and then I'd ask myself whether I was certain that what I'd constructed on my mind was based on truth and based on factual information. And more often than not, I realized that the conclusions that I'd come to were, in the bigger picture, utterly fanciful, and that I could disregard them and remove their influence immediately. Which also put me in a position where I more clearly understood whether I had all the information necessary or whether I actually needed more information in order to come to a more sensible and harmonious conclusion. So as a simple example, and based on my so-called spectral challenges, for example, I'd had a conversation with a friend and was conscious that I'd said something at the end that had appeared to disrupt the flow of the conversation. And my friend seemed to end the conversation more abruptly than would be usual. Now, I know that this probably wouldn't bother many people, but I used to let it upset me. Then at night, while I was trying to sleep, I'd ruminate over the ramifications of my mistake to the degree of which, within a short space of time, I'd escalated it to becoming a serious challenge that I needed to address. Now, fortunately, back then, we didn't have instant messaging, so I couldn't send a knee-jerk reactive message, which can be much worse when you think, for example, that your friend has been rude to you and not the other way around. Have you been there before? But anyway, what I'm likely to have conceived in my mind is something along the lines of, I've inadvertently upset my friend and now I need to take immediate action to correct my mistake. So as I said, what I learned to do is to ask myself whether the foundations of my conclusions were true relative to the facts. So primarily, in this circumstance, questions like, am I certain that I've upset my friend? The answer was always no, I'm not certain. Could there have been any other reason that they ended the call abruptly? The answer is absolutely yes. For example, they had another call come through, or something happened in their local environment that I couldn't see, anything like that. So once I'd asked myself enough pertinent questions along those lines, it soon became very clear for the vast majority of cases that I'd completely deluded myself and wound myself up, and all at a time that I was meant to be sleeping. So most of the times I realized that, in fact, I didn't need to take any further action at all. There wasn't a problem. I'd constructed it in my mind. And at the very least, I needed further information in order to come to a more sensible conclusion. In this case, the additional information that I could have gathered was by simply asking them the next time I spoke to them if I'd upset them or not, for example. Now, we'll be looking more closely into the dynamics surrounding assumption, presumption, and speculation a little later on in the course, but I think you get where I'm going with it for now. So, as I said in this exercise, we're going to revisit our observation of thought. And what I'd recommend is that you use your journal to make notes on thoughts that you have, which you can label as either negative or positive. Now, I wouldn't labor on it at this stage, but I would recommend consistency in your approach and noting down anything that crops up during the day. This is an exercise which is intended for you to begin to become aware of your thoughts and the impact that they have on how you feel and how you subsequently behave. So making a note of what you observe of your behavior, and particularly the behavior that you'd like to change, will be useful. For example, if a thought causes you anxiety or excessive anger, confusion, indecision, regret, or any other undesirable response, it'll equally serve the purpose of providing you with a record of your progress as we go along. So, thank you very much. And as always, I'm sending you tremendously positive energy and love unconditionally. Until next time.